You have to realize you don't have the answers. I mean, you don't get to be a CIO or a senior technology leader without some amount of ego. Let's be honest. But you really have to use the proverbial phrase, you really have to check that ego at the door when you're going to the business to say, hey, what do you want to accomplish? Because you just don't know. You're not sitting there on the front line doing the accounts payable, opening the mail, doing whatever. Like, you just don't get it.
BJ, how did you get into the world of IT, and did you know you were going to get into it?
Not even close. Not even close. I graduate from high school. I've got a scholarship to go down to Snow College. I was great at test taking. I was not great at following through on things. So I'm that kid who, graduates with like a 3.5 GPA, but I have a 35 on the ACT type kid. And so the only scholarship that I could get was at Snow College. And I'm like, sure. What are you going to study? I have no idea. So I went down to school, went on a mission, came back, didn't go right back to school right away. Got married. And then I'm like, okay, I guess I should start thinking about what I wanted to do. And I knew I wanted to get a degree. But I didn't know what. And that's, the whole thing about getting into economics, because it taught the most night classes. And so University of Utah, most night classes, it wasn't online at the time. It was, literally videotapes being sent to my house to watch videotapes and then taking tests, things like that. And I had gotten married. And so like when I started school again, I had gotten married that December, and we got pregnant right away. And so I had 3 kids under 3 when I graduated. But getting into IT was really just something I kind of fell into. I grew up enjoying technology, but not like the story that a lot of guys have of building their own computers or whatever. I just played a bunch on computers. And so I remember I got a job, a friend of my wife's husband ran a little tiny call center. And he's like, I need somebody to be a nighttime supervisor for like these 5 or 6 agents. And so I came in and they had this old green screen application that they used that was a scripting system for these inbound calls. And we got this client out of Dallas, Texas called groceryworks.com. So this was 2000, probably 2001, something like that. They wanted to be able to take chat, phone calls, and video calls. So I figured out how to take Microsoft Net Meeting and the voice, the analog PBX phone system, and a chat tool within Net Meeting, and kind of link them together so that we could have, omni-channel kind of structures.
That's pretty amazing way back then, right?
It didn't work great. I mean, let's be clear. It didn't work great, but it was possible. And so I worked there for a short period of time, and then I jumped to another call center technology company called EchoPass, which was a startup. They'd spun out of a call center out of American Fork called Cento, and they had created this whole structure of, again, omni-channel product that they were selling. The secret sauce underneath was Microsoft Access, of all things. And so they had taken like Genesis CTI and phones. I think there was Nortel or Avaya phone switch. Anyway, I got hired to be an implementation manager for them. Lasted about a year before I got laid off because the company ran out of money. And then jumped to Teleperformance as a technology, as a project manager. Communications Commerce, which was in turn bought by Teleperformance, so one of the largest call centers in the world. Promptly took over the entire implementation team and started doing big implementations for companies like Microsoft and Dell, Motorola, Sprint PCS when they were still around, Nextel when they were still around, companies like that. Started launching call centers around the globe and working primarily on the business side, but understanding technology and how to talk to developers and how to talk to engineers and all that type of stuff. And so I think my degree actually in economics helped because I really enjoyed this aspect of looking at the entire picture and isolating variables and saying, how do we solve for this? Like, if this changes, then what? And so did call centers for a while, went and worked for Zions Bank for about a year. Didn't enjoy the slower pace. It was really, really slow compared to what I've been doing. So I left that, went back into the call center, did some consulting work, went back to another call center where a guy that I had known said, hey, come run all of my technology. Met Niel in the MBA program, and then, just kind of went and worked with Niel at Western Governors, then worked with Niel at LC Tanner. And then Niel says, you shouldn't be here anymore. You need to go take the job with the Larry H. Miller Group at the Utah Jazz. So I went and took that CIO role, and now I'm the CIO for the group.
So BJ, your role changed dramatically from being the CIO of Larry Miller Sports and Entertainment to being the CIO of the Larry Miller Group, right?
Correct. Yeah.
How's it different?
It was very different. So when I joined as the CIO for LHMSC Sports Entertainment, at the time, that's when the Millers owned. So this was 2016. So we owned the Jazz and the Arena, the Bees and the Megaplex Theaters, which we still do. We owned Fans Sports Retail Apparel. We owned the radio station. We owned K-Jazz, the radio network. So we had these kind of disparate groups. And when I came on, they had not had a CIO. So the CEO and CFO met with me and said, we want to bring this on. We want to bring on somebody for the CIO role. It's the first time it's going to happen. What do you think? And so one of the things that I saw was these little small groups, and they had 3 different technology groups. One technology group at Fans, one technology group running the sports properties, and one technology group running the entertainment side, the Megaplex primarily. And so I said, look, this is going to work better if we do a kind of a shared services model to get some economies of scale. And there's a lot of overlap. And so I brought those together. It was pretty hands-on. 2017, we did a massive renovation of the arena, $125 million renovation, was responsible for all the technology that we put in there and how that worked. We did a lot to try to modernize. We had to move to a whole new theater management system within Megaplex Theaters, huge ticketing change from one ticketing partner to another ticketing partner that affected the Bees as well as the Megaplex. Divested of Fans, but it was a lot more kind of hands-on and very, at one point, shortly after the arena remodel, so from the fall of 2017, that season, that NBA season, for the next 2 seasons, I would have what we called game day responsibility. So I had seats and I was there, but I was really there to sit and watch Slack channels and see what was going on and fix things if they broke and work with my team to do so. And so my day consisted of, if we had a game at home that tipped off at 7, about 3:30, I'd show up at the arena and I would walk level 1 and level 2. So level 1's the locker room, the owner's suite, a number of different things. I would walk every single one, check every TV. I would actually determine what should be broadcast on which television based upon what was going on. I'd walk into the locker room, check with the players, check with the coaching staff, check with the training staff. Hey, is everything where it needs to be? Then I'd walk the second level, which was the Toyota Club at the time and a couple other clubs, make sure everything was on. We had certain kind of unwritten rules. Like we didn't want to have, for example, we'd have other sports games on, but let's say this game was a Friday game and there had been a Thursday night TNT game, and so the TNT would be on. Well, Friday, the channel would still be sitting on TNT, and it would probably be showing, Shawshank Redemption or something else because it's always on TNT. Or there'd be some sort of like a Friday night fights or MMA, and we'd want to make sure we'd turn those off. So basically the idea was anywhere I'm sitting in the clubs, I should be able to see what's happening down on the court plus other sporting events if they're available. And so that it was very hands-on in that regard. And then in 2019, the CEO, Clark Whitworth had been the CEO for the whole group. He left to actually go serve as a mission president, and Steve Starks was promoted to be the CEO of the whole group. Steve was the sports entertainment CEO. He reached out and said, hey, I want you to come be the CIO for the whole group, which had been tried one time before, hadn't worked tremendously well. It was like 2012 or 13, something like that. I don't remember. And so I came up, we talked about it. And so that fall, I came up as the CIO for the entire group. And it became much more about governance, structure, strategy, but also each group is different and has different needs. And so we started kind of looking at that. How do we do those types of things? Then we had this crazy thing called COVID. And then we sold the Jazz. And then we sold the dealerships. And then we bought a bunch of real estate stuff. We bought a healthcare company and completely changed everything. And so it's been a wild ride.
So how much do you get involved? I'm just curious in both the divestitures and then the merger and acquisition activity. Are you pretty heavily involved in the analysis, the decisions, the discussions?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes on. And we have a deals team who is responsible for looking at those types of things. They may come, let's say there's an industry or a vertical or something they're looking into getting into. They may come and say, hey, there's some technology components here. Can we talk with you a little bit, BJ, to understand more of what you see in this space? Not specific companies at the time, but more what does the space look like? Then what will happen is as we drill into a company and kind of determine this is a company we are interested in acquiring, when we get into due diligence, me and my team are involved. We're looking at everything from structures, systems, what are they doing, risk profile, cybersecurity pieces, going through all of those types of things, trying to figure all of that out. So we're very involved at that point. And a lot of that comes around what's the risk of bringing this company in to our portfolio and how much reserve do we need to make sure we hold aside to be able to remediate any sort of issues that we may run into along the way.
I get the impression then you went from fairly hands-on. I remember going to a Jazz game with you and you didn't pay attention to the game at all.
Yep.
Wandering around, checking on things. Now if I get the feeling that Larry Miller Group operates as sort of a holding company. There's not a lot of operational technology integration across the different businesses. So you've gone from hands-on to much more. So what is your role like now? Governance, portfolio management? Describe what your life is like.
So very much about strategy and governance. We have a small shared services team. So I have a team of about 29, 30 technology people that work directly for me. And let me back up a little bit and just kind of explain the organizational structure. So we're a family office, family business, and we act very much like a holding company. So we have platforms, as we refer to them, which are horizontally, vertically integrated organizations. We have our real estate platform. So in that real estate platform, you have a construction management company. You have a land development master plan community structure, which was an acquisition we bought Daybreak and bought the group that built out Daybreak. We have a residential home builder in Destination Homes that we purchased. We do multifamily. We do some land or some real estate investment. So we have all of these kind of pieces that all fit together inside the real estate platform. We have a senior health platform. So in 2020, we bought a company by the name of Advanced Healthcare that was a skilled nursing facility. I think they had 24, 26 or so facilities across the country at the time. Skilled nursing is that post-acute care. So you're an individual who goes in, potentially has a stroke, some sort of major issue. You can't quite transition home yet. You're going to come to a senior or to a skilled nursing facility, get your different therapy and everything to be able to transition home. We bought them, and since then they have expanded to be in skilled nursing, home health and hospice, assisted living, long-term care, and nurse staffing. And so they've kind of expanded and we're across the globe or across the country there. We have our sports and entertainment group still that consists of the Salt Lake Bees, the Megaplex Theaters, as well as the now Real Salt Lake, the Utah Royals. We bought the Utah soccer structures last year and a half ago, and then Big League Utah, which is our effort to bring a Major League Baseball team to Utah, and so there's that group, and then we have an investments platform, which is kind of a holding area for a lot of the direct investments that we do. And probably the largest in that group is Swig Drinks. We are the majority owners of Swig and work there. each of those platforms is supposed to operate independently. So there are CIOs for senior health, for sports entertainment. I'm also the CIO for the real estate group. And then I'm currently the acting CTO for SWIG, at least for a little bit longer. And so each of those groups are supposed to operate independently. They may share knowledge across those platforms, which we highly encourage, but we don't share domain login structures, networking, whatever else. We've actually been bit in the past of having too much shared, and then when you go to divest a company, everybody else gets left holding the bag. It can be really challenging that way. And so we need them to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. We're a really disciplined and deliberate organization, very conservative in nature. And so we don't want to get too far out. We don't want one company subsidizing another company, one platform subsidizing another platform. And so my role really consists of kind of this overarching strategy of where we're trying to go. What's the governance platform that we have? And the small team that I have does perform some shared services. We do technology support for what we call LHM Co. or the Larry H. Miller Company. That's the holding family business side of things. Plus we do all of the technology, almost all the technology support for the real estate group. We do some work for senior health. We do some work for sports entertainment, and we do some work for SWIG. But each of those, you can kind of almost think about it like an MSP model, sort of, in the way that we do it. We're not trying to make money, the technology group. We're just passing through costs. But we have different teams that do everything from desktop support and system support to data engineering. And then cybersecurity is a big piece that we do. We have standards for everybody in terms of what they have to hit. And so I work a lot on the strategy and the governance side, work a lot on, where should we go? What's out on the horizon? Trying to see around corners, that type of thing. And then actually a lot of my time right now is spent on AI. Me and a couple other people on my team are the primary people in the AI space, really trying to understand how does this work, educating everybody, teaching, rolling out best practices, and trying to move that along.
So on the AI side, how involved do you get in the various platforms and their AI strategies? Are you helping them? Are you advising them, guiding them, in addition to the overall for the group?
Yeah, so it's definitely an advising, guiding, and helping. What I have to do, we have to be really careful. I think everybody knows this, anyone who's spent any time in any sort of leadership. I can tell people all I want what they have to do. They don't want to do it unless they want to do it. And so we really, especially on the AI side, what we're trying to do is say, hey, let me show you how this can help you. Let me introduce you to it and give you some exposure. We've used very intentional words like, I want you to go play. And it scares people a little bit when they hear me say that. But we really try to say, hey, let's go and play. And so we have set standards and policies and practices that we've adopted and say, these are the policies, procedures around the way in which we're going to use AI, generative AI, and how we're going to use it. And then we try to do 2 different things. LHM Co. becomes a little bit of an incubator. We're a little more resilient relative to, we don't have widgets that we're selling and manufacturing. And so we can be a little bit more resilient around what we're trying to do. And we can test things out and then say, look, here's what we've done. This is how well it's worked for us or not worked for us. And then the other thing that we have done is provide training and instruction and guidance around what you could go do, and encouraging, again, people to go play. So I've spoken a couple of different times at our leadership conferences. I've worked with different people within our group to just help them to see what's happening. And simple things like, for example, hey, you got a vacation coming up. Have you thought about using AI to help you plan your vacation? What? Wait, it can do that? Yeah, let me show you what I've done for this trip. What about it? And just working with them and really opening their eyes to what's possible. And then we will incubate ideas and capabilities. I've got an individual on my team. We had started a few years ago, a team we had called the innovation team. It's changed and shifted a little bit over the couple of years, but really what we have is an individual. Think about him as an internal consultant who is available for anyone in the group at no cost to ask questions and have him do almost a POC up to a certain dollar amount that we'll cover for them to be able to remove a little bit of the risk from them in terms of going into the unknown. And then they can test it out. And they're like, okay, we've reached that stage where we've proved it or not proved it. If you want to move forward, there's costs associated with this. And you get to choose whether or not you want to do that. I'm not going to tell you you should do it or not. And that's kind of the approach that we've taken.
Interesting.
I think that's a really good approach. We've seen that people want to adopt AI, they want to get it throughout their organization, but as they push it, people aren't doing it. So I like how you're intentional about saying, hey, this is play, training your executive team, it sounds like, and then also giving them that sandbox or that person to be able to, that's to be able to implement with that low cost. That's really helpful. Any other things that you've seen as far as getting the whole organization adopting an IT transformation, right? AI is a big one, but any other principles that you really have seen that could apply to the other CIOs listening as you've seen, okay, this is what's really helped as we've transformed certain things in IT?
I think the biggest thing is you have to realize you don't have the answers. I mean, you don't get to be a CIO or a senior technology leader without some amount of ego. Let's be honest. But you really have to use the proverbial phrase, you really have to check that ego at the door when you're going to the business to say, hey, what do you want to accomplish? Because you just don't know. You're not sitting there on the front line doing the accounts payable, opening the mail, doing whatever. Like, you just don't get it. One of the things that I learned early in my career in the call center world, we would have these grand designs for these programs that were 2, 3, 4, 700 agent programs. And we'd be like, okay, here's how we're going to increase the sales, or here's how we're going to reduce the handle time, or whatever it is we were doing. And if we couldn't get the supervisors, not the agents, but the supervisors on board, remember, these are the people managing about 8 to 10 people. If they weren't on board, it would never go anywhere. Didn't matter how much we mandated it. No amount of carrot or stick changed that fact. If they didn't get on board, it wasn't going to happen. And so I see that a lot in the space that we're in now. I can walk into a room and I can go in with 2 different approaches. I can go in, hey, here I am. I came in, I rode in on my white knight. I'm the white knight on my stallion from the ivory tower, and I'm going to solve all your problems. And everybody just says, yeah, okay, whatever. Or I can walk in and say, what are the challenges that you're running into? Let's talk through them. I don't understand what you're talking, like, honestly say that. I don't know. I don't understand what you're talking about. Walk through this with me a little bit more. Really get them to give you some of the process so that you can begin to understand what are the constraints they're running into. And then you can start to take your knowledge that you have and bring that together and say, okay, well, did you know that we've tried this and that didn't work well, but this did. And then we took that idea over from here. And let me bring in some people from the other platforms that have run into a similar challenge. Why don't we look at this in a more collaborative way? This is all stuff everybody knows. They've read, I don't know, however many books, read however many Harvard Business Review articles, whatever else. But it really is the answer. Get rid of the ego and ask those questions. And always start small. I think one of the things, for example, on the AI side, so many people are trying to hunt for the $1 million, $2 million, $5 million idea. I'm going to save the company this. I'm going to make them this. And I think the problem with those big swings is you're also going to have big misses, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. However, especially in the AI space where it's so, I don't want to use the word unproven, but you can make some big mistakes really fast and spend a lot of money. Hunt for the $10,000, $20,000 idea, because a bunch of those added together get you to $1 million. And those are the easy ones to find. And then what are the learnings that you take from that as you begin to grow? And I see that a lot with transformation. How do you just start small?
I love that. I wrote down these things for all CIOs, like realize you don't have all the answers. Go in and interview and understand really what people want to accomplish and get everyone on board that needs to, and then start small. That is good. BJ, that's very good.
one of the things we talk about a lot within my team is what's the desired business outcome? Every business unit, individual, company, whatever else, they have some sort of a desired outcome. What's that desired business outcome? And there's a formula for that desired business outcome, or at least inputs into that desired business outcome. You have to have both technical and business capabilities to accomplish whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. And being able to identify first, what's the outcome? What are the business capabilities that already exist to be able to achieve that outcome? And how are they supported? And then what are the technical capabilities necessary to either support the business or support the outcome directly? Identify those and start to work from that incrementally. You're not responsible as a technologist for the business outcome. And if you actually try to take that responsibility on, well, you're screwed. Like, why would you ever do that? We talk a lot about, we hear it all the time just in our own language. We talk about where's the business versus IT. Well, that's BS. IT is part of the business. Without IT, the business doesn't run. Without the business, IT doesn't have somewhere to work. Like, these work together. And so everybody has a desired outcome. It's just who's bringing which capabilities and how do you bring them together? And that's to be able to understand those capabilities, you have to ask the questions.
A couple of questions in no particular order. How has the role changed during your career, meaning technology leader? And how do you think it's going to change going into the future? What are some of the characteristics and competencies somebody has to have to be successful, not only today, but into the future?
I think the role is going to become less technical. And it has become less technical. What do I mean by that? I think that I'm seeing more and more CIOs come into the role who have not been developers, database engineers, systems engineers, whatever. Like, they haven't done what I'll refer to as the hard skills within technology. They're coming into it a little bit different. I'm probably one of those, definitely one of those. You don't want me writing code. You don't want me writing SQL scripts. Like, you just don't want me doing that. But my career's been successful because I've been able to straddle the fence between the two. I can communicate across that spectrum. And so I think the role is becoming less technical. It's becoming more business solution oriented. It's a matter of saying, the skill that's necessary is, can I comprehend how the business makes money, what I need to do to be able to support that aspect, and how do I rally the troops? And by troops, I mean people, processes, technology, systems, third parties, whatever else. How do I bring them together to support those desired outcomes? That is really, to me, how the role has changed over the years and will continue to change. Especially with the advent of, vibe coding, as we refer to it today, is going to continue to expand, for example. And I could save probably a ton of money and vibe code a ton of different things. And I don't know if it's good or not. How do I know? Until I'm exploited one way or another. But I still have to deliver something and bring it to market. And I have to understand the technology enough to be able to answer whether or not this vibe coded thing works well. But I also have to respond to a business need that means I got to get to market faster. If a CIO came in to a business today and said it's going to take 36 months or 24 months or even 12 months to refactor this with a team of 20 engineers, like, run away. I don't think you can't say that any longer. That's I think one of the biggest problems. And so that's where the business, I don't say the business, but it's less technical. It's way more about communication and understanding and being able to be articulate and deliberate in what you're trying to do.
Okay, what's the greatest lesson you ever learned in your life? And secondly, the hardest lesson you ever learned in your career?
Greatest lesson and hardest lesson, I think, come together at the same point. And I don't know that I could nail it into one specific instance. But it goes back to this comment about ego. I hope that as I've aged, I've become less prideful Early in my career, I made a lot of assumptions about how much I knew relative to others, meaning I definitely knew more than everyone else, and everyone else was just an idiot that they couldn't see it. And I jumped around a lot in my career, and I don't know that was a bad thing per se, but I've been at LHM since 2016. It's the longest I've ever been anywhere. Prior to that, the longest I'd ever been anywhere was 4 years. And prior to that was 2. And so I never stayed anywhere long enough to get to the point where I'm fixing my mistakes. I was always coming in and fixing somebody else's mistakes, and then leaving before my mistakes came back to haunt me. And so now I'm in this role, and I'm beginning to see things that are coming back where I made choices about, I made choices to move things in a certain direction. And I'm now seeing certain decisions that I made were wrong. And that's okay. There's an idea out there of being able to like use a decision journal, and like decision journals are really amazing to be able to sit down and say, I made this decision on this day. Here's the information that I had. Here's the reason I made the decision. And then to go back, call it a year or 2 years later, and look at why you made that decision, and then where you actually are along that decision journey to be able to determine, was it a good or bad decision? And outcome doesn't necessarily determine whether it was a good or bad decision. It's the information you had available to you, but it's still helpful to learn. So I don't think fixing your own mistakes is a bad thing. But early in my career, I had pretty large ego, and about how good I was, and that led me to probably not learn as much as I could have learned from people who were really smart. I didn't always take the time to try to understand, how does the business make money? It was almost like I was at times trying to reinvent the wheel for how the business should be making money. Not that I actually thought through that and said that, but my actions probably screamed that BJ's trying to reinvent the wheel here. And part of that's my nature, to try to look and see, how do you make things better? And again, this is a two-edged sword. I've been successful because I am able to see things that not everybody can see about changes that need to be made. But sometimes, it's like Chesterton's fence, that whole analogy of Chesterton's fence. You come upon a fence in a field, and it's like, well, what the heck? This fence is in my way. I'm just trying to walk across the field. I can obviously see there's no reason for this fence to be here. Just tear the fence down. Yeah, well, there might actually be a really, really good reason, or maybe there's not, but ask a question or two. And I didn't always do that early in my career. And I've learned now that speed to decision-making, or the speed in making a decision, isn't as critical as having the information necessary to make that decision. And there's a balancing act. You don't want to get frozen in decision-making and wait for more and more and more information. There's no such thing as perfect information. But ask questions. Definitely be willing to say, I don't know. And if you don't understand how a business makes money, there's nothing effective that you can do to help that business improve, because you'll make suggestions that just cost more money. Or, hey, great, I just made the big company another $10 million. It only cost me 12 to do it. Like, why would you ever do that?
I love that. As you look back on your career now or before, any of the worst technology decisions that you would want to tell CIOs about, as specific as you can, the stories that you're like, man, this was a bad one. This is what I learned. This is why. As you look at that, I love that decision journal. I think that's a great insight. And I'm just curious if you've gone through that and share, I don't know, that's a hard question, right? Your worst technology decision, or did anyone come to mind? Maybe a bad one. And maybe you can say one that Niel made when you worked with him. Maybe that's what we need. That's what we need you to do.
I don't think we have time to go through the number that would be.
I don't know. Niel's never made a bad decision, but in the call center days early on, they weren't necessarily decisions that I specifically made, but I definitely contributed to it. CRMs, right? Back in the day of when CRMs were first coming out, Vantiv was one I remember. I'm trying to remember another one. It started with a C. I can't remember. But these were massively expensive products that most people only needed somewhere between 15 to 20% of the functionality. And I would say that a lot of that happens today with big products, like say going and buying a Salesforce or something like that, when you don't actually need everything that comes with that license. And so there were many times in that whole conversation working with these partners like Nextel or Sprint or Dell and saying, well, here's what we need to do. We're trying to drive this behavior. Let's go buy this big product that exists here on this CRM platform, and not understanding, not drilling in far enough to think about the human behavior that was contributing to the lack of performance. And so, hey, let's go spend another couple $100,000 a year on a piece of software to fix a problem that is a human behavior problem. And again, technology is an enabler. It's an accelerator. It's going to either accelerate success or failure, but it's going to accelerate something. And so, like, I can think about that's been done. I've also learned, I tend to be a pretty trusting person, and I've learned at times maybe it's okay to be trusting, but sometimes, trust but verify. I found myself a couple of different times having to get into a contract dispute and realizing that I probably should have done a little more digging into the contract as we were kind of going through a few things. Again, I assumed that people would act the way I wanted them to act, and I would assume that everything was going to go where it was going to go. Again, pride kind of stepping in, not being willing to recognize what I don't know. And so there's been a couple of things like that where you just find yourself in that kind of a circumstance.
I want to ask you and Niel this as far as work when you talk about trusting. Is that the vendor? Is that the reseller? Because we come from the reseller point of view, and I think we help in that in the most regard. But have there ever been what's my question here? Is really, as you look at trusting and verifying, do you rely on your partners there, or are they part of the the problem? And what have you seen as that's one of my questions, multi-side question is, what are you looking for in a partner or a vendor that, like, some of your top three things that you're looking for? And I think that's for Niel and you, BJ.
Okay. Well, like, I can talk about a circumstance that we are currently dealing with. There is a partner. So we had a third party, a VAR, that brought a solution to us. And we went through the process and then talked with the vendor, or the particular vendor, and we established a really powerful relationship with them. It was a great situation. Everything was great. We were getting what we wanted. They were getting what we wanted to give them. Again, the relationship was built on trust, and it was an environment where we could ask questions, push back, come to solutions. Like, it worked really, really well. Well, private equity firm got involved, bought an organization out. So the PE firm buys them out. A bunch of the original founders go away. The PE firm, I don't have the same relationship with. And I didn't make sure that certain agreements that we had were in the agreement, were actually in writing. I should have, but I didn't. And then I assumed that the PE firm was going to be trustworthy and that they would actually honor agreements. And of course they didn't. And they've just been an absolute pain to work with. So I don't know that this, like, in this situation, it wasn't the VAR per se. They also kind of found themselves in that circumstance. But I have figured out that good relationships in the technology business world require things to be in writing. And you shouldn't feel bad about saying, hey, great. You know that scale up, scale down thing that we've talked about? I need to get it in writing. What, you don't trust me? Has nothing to do with not trusting you. Has everything to do with, we've got to, if we trust each other, then there's no reason we shouldn't be able to put it in writing. And good agreements make for really powerful relationships.
I think that will help a lot of CIOs and avoid some of the similar mistakes, because you never know what's going to happen. You look at the VMware Broadcom situation as well, right? Like, there's just some things that we don't have control over. At the same time, yeah, there's so many things change that, contracts keep honest people honest, right?
Yep.
And so it really does help. Neil, you had something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you asked about the great relationships. The great relationships are relationships of trust with everybody in my life. With the manufacturer, the vendor, the bar, everybody, the people on my team, the executive team, the people that work for the because there's an overhead to a lack of trust. And I'm much more comfortable talking to somebody with whom I have a relationship of trust and having an honest conversation rather than worrying about how might they use this against me. How might I be burned by this in the future? Because then I got to spend a lot more time and effort to verify and validate and question and nitpick and. And I tell people the best relationships I've had with my providers is where we trust each other completely, which means I never negotiate a contract because I know they're going to do the best for me. I'm going to do the best for them. We're going to create a win-win relationship where we both benefit from it, and we benefit it to the benefit of both of us rather than some kind of win-lose. Because then suddenly I'm not spending weeks or months pitting people against each other, negotiating. I'm just saying, Mike, here's the situation I'm in. What can you do for me that you think is fair to both you and to me? And maybe that's the extent of our grueling negotiations, is the belief that Mike's not going to cheat me and I'm not going to cheat Mike.
I think that's really key too. I think sometimes people are worried too much about extracting too much from somebody. They'll tout, hey, I had a great contract negotiation. I got this price, it was super low, whatever else. And again, this kind of goes back to the same thing about how do people make money? If you're taking all the incentive out of a contract for somebody where they don't make money, then when you call them at 3:00 in the morning to solve a problem that is outside of the contract, why would they? Like they're just not going to do it. And so I think that's a real key thing of making sure that the relationship is such that I can call you at 3:00 in the morning and I can ask you, please, can you, I know this is outside the scope, but I got this situation and not a problem. It's that type of relationship. And I have partners like that and those same partners are the people that I've been working with for going on 20 years now.
And it's the same on the other side, where the provider calls me and says, Niel, we're getting killed by this. Okay, let's figure out how to restructure the win-win. Because that's when those are the people, like BJ said, you carry your entire career. And sometimes it's more at a personal relationship than me and the organization for whom that person works. You know what I mean? I trust them implicitly, and you hope they're working for an organization with the similar win-win mentality and integrity.
Yep.
Yeah, I love the idea that it's all about the long-term client satisfaction as opposed to winning the deal, which is why we love being in the VAR space. Is it doesn't help us to win one deal or two deals and win them at either in high margins. It's like we want the relationship for the 10, 20 years, and it really aligns our incentives, right? We're incented to make sure you're taken care of, that you want to continue to do technology buying from us. And so I think it is about the relationship.
BJ and I have certainly interacted with what I call transactional account managers and salespeople, and they just don't survive very long in this world with us. It's not worth the pain and agony. It's just not. This has been great. I enjoy spending time with you, BJ. Always have.
Thanks, Neil. Same to you.
Ever since we sat in back of class together and made fun of all the other students
Yes.
in our arrogance and pride.
Yep.
As you think on your career, what's the thing you've done that you're most proud of? Could be a project, could be a business process change, could be a culture you changed. As you think back on your career, say, I've done a lot of really good things, but this is the one where it really all came together for me.
Yeah, it's not a technology project or anything. It's actually culture development. I view the number one job that I have of hiring, the number one job I have is to hire and lead good people. It isn't about anything else. Because if I don't do that, I can't get anything else accomplished. I mean, let's be honest. I just show up and take the credit for everybody else. I don't actually do a lot. And I have really amazing people that work for me, and we've worked really hard to build a really strong culture. And that comes from the experiences over the course of my career working for some really, really good people, Niel being one of them, and learning a lot from him. And then also working in situations where it didn't go well. I remember, for example, being at an organization that was acquired by a private equity company. And so it had been a really great relationship and things had gone really well. We were acquired by a PE firm and they brought in a new group and made certain promises that they didn't, of course, deliver on. And I remember walking in one day, I just had it, and I walked into the CEO's role or CEO's office and I said, look, you don't want me here. Let me be very clear. You need me here, but you don't want me here. So let's just part ways. And they're like, yeah, we definitely don't want you here. We've just been waiting for you to leave. And I'm like, great. Okay. Here's this is, we can make this painless. Here's how this will work out. And so a huge part of what I've really worked on is to build a culture, and I've gotten very deliberate about it. Me and my team, we write it down. It's written, it's published. Everybody knows what the culture is supposed to be. We have practices and procedures that we follow that are all culture driven. We have ways in which we hire that are very specific, rules and steps that we follow that we don't compromise on. And I've had people over the course of my career, as we've built out this process of hiring, for example, we're going to lose this person. Let's shortcut. No, we don't shortcut. If they're not around when they're not around, then, hey, we might miss out on some candidates, but we are going to get the right people in the right places. Slow to hire, quick to fire, make those type of changes. I remember having an individual that worked for me, one of the most brilliant and talented SQL Server engineers in the country, and an absolute bear to work with. And I waited too long to make a change and lost some key people because of it, and lost momentum and lost trust. And all those things are tremendously difficult to get back. That flywheel that you get started is very difficult to start. And so when it starts to slow down and get stopped based upon bad people, and so we really focus on that. And I can't think of. I'm sure there are people, but I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that has left our organization who wouldn't come back in a heartbeat if there was a role that was available to them. And we've taken an approach of saying, look, we want to, for example, all of our jobs, we would love to be able to hire from within. But, I have more help desk engineers than I have CIOs. And so that's not always possible. But when somebody reaches a point where they're ready to make that next step in their career, and we talk with them about it, we say, look, we're really hopeful that something opens up, but I don't see anything happening. Why don't we start looking outside? And they're shocked. Wait, you're trying to get rid of me? No. You deserve to progress. This is what Niel did to me, right? So I come and I work for OC Tanner. Niel's the CIO. I'm the VP of Business Systems. And Niel brought me in and said, hey, one of the things we want to do is I want you to be my succession plan. You'll take my role. And I'm like, great. So we start working. We've been together for a couple of years. And Niel says, hey, there's this job. LHM Sports Entertainment, the Jazz, they're hiring somebody, you should go apply. And I had actually been interviewed and offered the CIO job at the LHM Auto Group, and I had turned it down the year before. Didn't feel right. And so Niel says, look, I said, Niel, we tried that route. I went there before. I don't want to leave. Remember, we got this plan. And he says, do you really want to stick it out for another 8 years? Because that's how much how much longer it was before Niel retired at the time. And he says, you're ready. You should go talk with them. And so I'm where I'm at now because Niel was willing to say, hey, look, you should go talk with them. And so we've really kind of tried to carry that forward. And we do that with a lot of people. And every time we post a new role for something, we always get ex-LHM employees who have taken another role somewhere else and they want to come back. I just hired a data engineer back who had left when we were at Sports Entertainment. My leadership team at LHM has, let me think for a second. One of them has been with me for the time I started. He actually was there when I started. So since 2016. Another one, I hired her as my EA in when did I hire her? 2017, I think. And now she's our director of operations. My data lead, the data team manager, he's been with us since 2017 or 18. Another guy on my team has been with the LHM group for, I think, like 19 years total. And he's been with me the whole time I've been at LHM Co. And so, like, we just don't lose people unless it's the right thing to do. In other words, right thing for them to move on or right thing for the organization to move them on. And so that's probably the greatest accomplishment of my career is building. We talk about it at LHM all the time that we are there to enrich lives. And that includes providing an environment where people get paid a good market wage, have a good living experience or working experience, can go spend time with family because that is way more important than anything else we're ever going to do. And can have that type of an organization and feeling and opportunities. Yeah, I could go on for a while about that. That's easily the biggest accomplishment.
That's amazing, BJ. Thanks.
BJ, thank you so much for spending time with us on
You're
our
welcome.
CIO Unscripted podcast. And we really appreciate your insights and the time you spent with us. We know your time's valuable and really appreciate it. Last question, is there anything you would want all CIOs to know about anything that you're like, hey, if I have some last parting advice, what would you tell CIOs of maybe something we didn't cover here of like, hey, this is of a lesson learned or just a bit of information that you would be talking to other some of your peers about?
Two things that come to mind. One goes back to that last answer I gave. Build a culture and be very deliberate about it. Don't be afraid to write down what your culture is. Don't be afraid to write down, the individual steps. We do one-on-ones as a team every other week. Manager, like whatever it is, you're going to write it down here. Make sure it's written. Make sure everybody knows where they're at. Build a culture that is critical to your success. And then the other thing that I would say is be passionate about learning something. Spend the time to learn something. We age. I'm a big fan of Arthur Brooks and his books. And there's the concept of the second mountain in a career and the different types of learning and pliability that our brains have. And as we age, that knowledge goes from being really elastic to much more crystallized in terms of how quickly we can learn things. And we tend to be able to be accelerated in our ability to apply knowledge, but learning new knowledge can be a challenge. And if you're not spending time learning something, you're going to lose to the people who are. And again, you don't have to learn at the same pace you did when you're 25, but be working to learn something. And it doesn't even matter whether it's directly applicable to what you're doing or not. Be passionate about something, learn something, and share that knowledge. And don't fall into the mistake of screaming from the mountain stupid and the Dunning-Kruger effect. Like actually learn it. Spend some time. Don't be the people, all of us in 2020 that suddenly were master virologists and understood how viruses worked. And everybody talked about exactly how things worked. Spend some time learning. Spend some time learning. Figure it out. Figure something out. Put together a presentation. Teach somebody something. Just spend some time learning.
Love it. BJ, thank you so much.